Alright, questions on yesterday's assignment?
It's just like overall questions. I like forget like how you tell like if it's positive or negative. It's like the square root.
It has to do with what they gave you. If the y value of what they gave you is negative, you want it to be negative. If the y value is positive, you want it to be positive. So, Lady?
Can you do 6?
6. Alright, 6, I have y prime minus x e to the y equals 2 e to the y, and y of 0 equals 0. Who's got an idea of what we need to do on this one? This one's a little bit different than all the rest of them. Alright, Lilani, what you got?
So I added x e to the y over.
Alright, add x e to the y over. Alright, then pull out an e to the y.
And then I divided it over and multiplied the dx over.
Alright. So what does it look like over here?
1 over e to the y.
1 over e to the y, which is the same thing as e to the negative y. Alright, questions on that?
Okay, I got it now.
From there, we should be in pretty good shape, and we want to integrate. So if I integrate e to the negative y, what do we get?
Negative e to negative y.
Very good. Negative e to the negative y. Integrate x, we get 1/2 x squared. Integrate 2, I get 2x. Don't forget the plus c. Okay, let's talk about, well, we'll finish it and then we'll come back and talk about that. All right, what's my next step? Elias, what's my next step? Plug it in. All right, so what do we plug it in? And
0 and 0.
we're on number 6, 0 and 0. All right, so if I plug in 0 here, this gives me negative e to the 0. Over here, that's obviously going to be 0 plus c. So what is negative e to the 0? 1. So that c, that means c is negative 1. All right. What's next? Solve for y. So let's get rid of the negative. Took care of that. Now, how do I get rid of the e? Natural log. And we need to remember, raise your hand please, that when I put natural log into the problem, what else do I have to remember to do? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Alidi?
Absolute value.
Absolute value. And then I have to get rid of that last negative. There it is. Now let's go back over the points. Talk about the point distribution. Where do you get your first point from?
Separating the variables.
Separating the variables. So my first point is going to show up right there. Second point, integrating. Third point is the c. Fourth point, plugging in. And the last point, y by itself. So that's where you get your point from. Okay, and again, sometimes this step right here, integrating, can be worth 2. All right, very good.
So like, even if you don't get the final like answer correct, you'll still get points.
You'll get 4 out of 5 if you get everything but y by itself. Because sometimes it can be difficult to get y by itself. But if you get everything up to that point, you'll get 4 out of 5 points. Maybe 5 out of 6. It depends. All right. Other questions? Raise your hand, please. Abby? 5. All right. So y prime equals 2x secant y. All right, raise your hand if you can get me started on this one. Abby?
I have secant y dy equals 2x dx.
I agree with 2x dx. I don't like secant y dy. Abby?
Is it dy over secant y?
dy over secant y. But if I have a secant in the denominator, it's the same thing as having what up top? Cosine.
That just changes everything.
So we're looking at cosine y dy. That make sense?
Like you treat dy as just one, kind of, is that what you're saying?
Say it again.
It's like 1 over, you treat like it's 1 over secant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I always recommend you always keep dy and dx out to the side and don't put anything underneath it. If you got something, then always keep it in front of it. All right, so if I integrate cosine, I get sine. Over here, integrate that. I'm just going to get x squared plus c. Courtney, what's next?
Get the C separate.
Figure out what c is. So that means I need to plug in. So I plug in negative pi over 2 right here. What's sine of negative pi over 2? Negative 1. Plug in the 2 here, which gives me 4. So that means c is going to be negative 5. So I get sine of y equals x squared minus 5. Last thing to do is get sine by itself. Hunter, or sorry, get y by itself. Hunter, what do I do to get rid of that sine?
Divide it over.
Nope. Ryan?
Take inverse sine.
Take inverse sine of both sides.
What was that?
I literally.
There it is.
So just out of curiosity, are we supposed to know how to do inverse sine when you like that? How, from where?
Break out.
I know what inverse sine is, but like, how are we supposed to know to just do it in that situation?
Pre-calc.
I don't recall this in pre-calc.
We did it in pre-calc.
Do y'all recall it? Do you recall it, Drew?
We did it in
I
pre-calc.
don't recall.
Isn't the inverse of sine just x squared minus 5 over sine?
No.
No, it's not. So that negative 1 is not being from the bottom? No.
That negative 1 just identifies it as an inverse.
Inverse, okay.
What's the other thing? What's the other way I can write this instead of sine to the negative 1?
Arc sine.
Arc sine. You could also see it as
I
arc
remember
sine.
I do remember arc sine, okay.
Same thing.
I didn't know this.
Alright, let's do one more, Abby.
Number 7.
7.
Why is it
9. Alright, we'll look at 7 and then we'll talk about 9. Alright, on 7, what do I need to do to separate? On 7. What needs to be moved? The y cubed needs to be moved. So I'm going to divide by y cubed. What's the same thing as dividing by y cubed? Y to the negative 3. So I've got y to the negative 3 dy. On the right side, I've got 2x sine of x squared dx. Everybody good with the separation?
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you don't separate correctly, what does that mean? Everything else is wrong. So extremely important that we separate correctly. Alright, so if I integrate y to the negative 3, I get negative 1 over 2y squared. Over here, technically we want to do a u for x squared, but the nice thing is, what's the derivative of x squared? 2x. So it's taken care of. All I have to do is integrate sine, and I get... There it is. Now, does anybody need me to integrate this step by step?
Yes.
Good. Alright, so we're going to do u equals x squared, which means du equals 2x dx. I've got my match here. So when I substitute, I get sine of u du, which is negative cosine of u plus c, and then substitute back in here, and that's how we end up with that. Pretty much whatever your u is, if your u shows up, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, just like this. We don't have to worry about it. I just integrate what's there. Alright, so next step, plug in. So I plug in 0 and -1, so that's going to make it -1/2 over here. Cosine of 0 is 1. It's 1, and then I stick the negative on it from there. So that means C is going to be 1/2. All right, next step. Solve for y, but what do you recommend we do? Multiply by -2. And then my last step,
You just put everything over 1.
then switch them. Yep, and then that last step is to square root it. Okay, so Mallory, is that going to be a positive or negative in front of the square root?
Negative.
It's going to be a negative in front of the square root. Everybody understand why I need a negative in front of my square root? Because yes, my initial condition, my y value was negative. If I've got a radical, the only way a y value can be negative is if it has a negative in front of it. Lonnie, downstairs, main office. There should, near the copier, there should be 2 sets of papers. There should be a note stack and there should be a assignment stack. They may be together though. Go grab those one, please. All right, while we're waiting on her, we'll go ahead and do one more. Haley, which one did you want?
9.
9. Alright, find a curve in the xy plane that passes through the point 0, 3, and whose tangent line at a point xy has a slope of 2x over y squared. Now this problem is not actually hard. The hard part is understanding what it's actually telling you. Okay, so the first question is, what are they giving me with the 0, 3? Y 0 equals 3. Very good. Okay, second question is, what are they giving me when they say it has a slope of 2x over y squared? That's my derivative. Okay, that's it. So this problem is exactly the same as all the other problems.
Great, love that.
So I'm going to get y squared dy equals 2x dx. So I'm going to get 1/3 y cubed equals x squared plus c. Plug in 0 and 3. So 1/3 times 27 equals 0 plus c. So that means c is 9. Alright, then the 2 steps to get y by itself. Multiply by 3. And cube root. Very good. Not who I thought she was. Had to send Lilani to do your job.
Sorry.
Wait, I have a question. How did you go on classroom aid? What? I never heard of Texas classroom aid.
Well, other classes have them. Why can't I?
Hey, I wasn't questioning why. I just never heard it.
Mallory.
Okay, so say like 3 was negative, since it's a cube root, would your answer still be negative or would it change?
The only time you ever have to alter what's in front of the radical is if it's an even radical. If it's an odd radical, whatever you get is what you get.
Okay.
Yes.
You may have answered this yesterday, but when you separate the the slope, do you do that regardless of numerator and denominator? They just both go equal to each other?
Well, y is always on the left, and x step is always on the right,
Okay.
and coefficients always stay on the right.
Okay.
Is it
But it wouldn't be like y to -2 because it's on the bottom of it.
Right. But I have to move it over, so I got to move it over
Like,
mathematically
Think of it
first.
like dy dx equals 2x over y squared. Like how all the other problems are set up like that. So then you like it's pretty much like that. Like you just set it up.
Oh, so that's where the...
So that's why he just didn't like write it out. But this is what it is. Like that's what the
And
problem
then you square
is.
the like.
Yeah, and so then you move the dx over and then you move y.
Gotcha.
He just didn't write that out.
Oh, it's like oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Press like and
No.
subscribe.
Kind of, I guess. It's just like all the other problems, he just didn't write out dy, dx, and y. Like, he just like knew how to do that.
I don't think it's recorded.
Like, they do that for the
That's it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You should calm down right now.
No, she
Us Canadians have a saying.
Okay.
You need to start putting some
You hit someone in the face, you say, I'm sorry. And if someone
But
hits you in the
like
face,
the
you say, I'm
That's
sorry.
taking them to dinner.
And like, look at me, she's talking, she goes, A? And then just like continues talking, I was like, oh my gosh, she's so
All right, we're gonna do some more practice. More practice on solving differential equations today. How many examples do I have? 3 or 4? So we have 4 examples to work through.
Oh yeah.
All right, here we go. Number 1, or the first example, dy dx equals 9x squared y, and y of 0 equals negative 2. All right, so Jarrell, get me started on this one. What do you want to do?
I was not here yesterday.
You haven't picked it up yet?
No. I looked on Remind to see if there's a video.
I know, I was slacking yesterday. I had some issues going on
And you-
yesterday. Roshan,
Okay, I can barely see it, but I can read it.
you got it on your paper.
Oh, I do?
That's what I just
You got rid of
handed.
my only excuse. Okay, do you want to divide by y?
Divide by y. So I get 1 over y dy equals 9x squared dx. Now, earlier, when we divided by like a y squared or a y cubed, what do we do to it over here on this side?
And y negative.
We made it y to the negative 2 or y to the negative 3. But if it's just y, we want to leave it in the bottom. Okay, so if it's just y, leave it down there. If it's something other, like y squared or y cubed, we want to move it up.
Is there a reason?
There is a reason.
Because you can't like y to the 0 when you integrate, right?
Right. So if I get 1 over y, to integrate 1 over y, what does it turn into, Mandy? Natural log.
I give up. I'm just not calculating.
So that's why whenever you're just dividing by y, you always leave it as 1 over y because it's going to turn into the natural log. Okay, if it's anything else, you want to move it up, make it a negative exponent.
So 1 over y is equal to natural log.
When you integrate 1 over y, it turns into natural log, yes.
So what if it was 1 over x would be natural log after that? Okay.
You're scaring me because we've tested over this stuff.
Did you see my test grade? Explain.
All right, next step.
plug in.
Plug in, so I'm going to plug in negative 2. So that turns into the natural log of 2. I'm going to plug in 0. So that means C is the natural log of 2. There it is. All right. So now I need to get y by itself. How many points are left at this point?
2.
1 point. There's only 1 point left. So if I struggle getting that last point, I'm not going to worry about it because it's only 1 point. Okay? But I want to get that last point, so what do I do to get it? How do I get rid of that natural log? I-E, yes, E. Now I'm going to show you something, and then I want somebody to tell me why this is true. How is that the same thing as that? Okay?
Because the e and the natural log cancel each other out.
Why wouldn't it be plus 2?
Excellent.
Why wouldn't it be e to the 3x cubed and then plus 2?
Because it just wouldn't, like. Because the e and the natural log are the same, so the 2 would stay with the e. Like you're
I need a better. I need a better explanation.
That's just the rules.
Isn't it like the exponent thing? Well, you can be like the exponent,
The
you
prop-
can,
the
like,
base.
be its coefficient if they just some kind of rule. We learned it like last.
Don't you multiply them if they're in the exponents?
You're getting closer. We're
Okay.
getting
It's just the
hotter.
rules. That's just what.
If
Getting hotter.
And you
if
have
they're
to.
adding in the exponents is a multiplication.
What's multiplication?
The two exponents.
All right, so you're closer.
Okay.
That was loud. All right, so if I have a base and then exponents are being added together, that's the same thing as separating it into two bases and multiplying. Because when I'm multiplying, what do I do with the exponents?
You're adding.
I'm adding. So that means if I'm doing the reverse and my exponents are being added, then that means I can separate them into two separate things using multiplication. Okay? So that's the math reason behind it. Then, once I get here, I can do what Mallory was talking about, and this turns into 2. So that's where the 2 comes from. Okay? So this is the math behind it. From now on, you can just know that it goes from here to there and understand that this is the math behind it. Ivan?
See, I knew that.
Say again?
I didn't
More than like, if it's free response, yes, they'll take it. If it's multiple choice, that's not going to be an answer choice. They're going to do the bottom one on an answer choice.
How do you get rid of the?
All right, great question. Mallory's on top of it today. So we got to get rid of that absolute value. How do we get rid of absolute value?
Shoot, I don't know, bro.
What'd you say? No, I don't have to do it piecewise. What? I put plus and minus on the other side. But if we're doing differential equations, we don't want plus and minus. We want to choose which one.
Minus.
So it's going to be positive or it's going to be negative. And this tells me it's got to be negative. And there's my answer.
Hey, I have a question. I have a question. It's cool, Brady. So, plus or minus the absolute value.
To get rid of an absolute value, you put plus or minus on the other side.
So how does it cancel out? Like, I don't get how
I'm not canceling out. I'm choosing one. Because this right here tells me when I stick 0 in there, I got to get a -2 out. And the only way I can get a -2 out of this is if there's a negative in front.
Yeah, so how do you get rid of absolute values? Just by adding plus or minus.
Right. Putting plus or minus on the other side gets rid of an absolute value.
Yeah, I guess. Well, how does that work?
I'll come back to you. It's a valid question.
Thank you.
I don't have a quick answer right now though. All right, next problem. All right, y prime equals y plus 3 over x squared. X cannot be 0, and y of 2 equals 1. Somebody raise your hand and get us started on this one. Ethan?
Is it y plus 3 dy? Or do you say coefficients go to the right side?
Well, I don't have a coefficient.
Okay. Well, would that 3 go to the left side too?
Yep, they have to go. The y plus 3 has to stay together.
Okay. So it would be y plus 3 dy on the left?
No.
No?
Y plus 3 to the -1, like the whole thing too.
Right, but I don't want a -1 exponent.
So then would you just do 1 over y plus 3?
1 over y plus 3.
I didn't know if it was like added together like that. Just seemed like you did that.
That's on top.
Whoops, that stays on the bottom. Now this one, that one I do want to change to -2. Now why am I changing this one and not changing this one?
Because there's not.
Right, because this one is something other than 1. This one has an exponent of 1, so it needs to stay. Yes.
Even if the y is in the numerator, that's always going to be divided? Like on the...
Well, it's in the numerator on the right,
Okay.
but I need to move it to the left.
Okay.
So if it's on the numerator on one side, when you move it to the other side, it goes to the denominator.
And that's where the dy dx come in?
Because y prime is the same thing as dy over dx.
Okay.
All right, so now we're ready to integrate. So this turns into natural log, absolute value, y plus 3. the right side turns into
Negative 1 over
-1 over x plus c. And when you get into the natural log integration, that's usually where you get an extra point for the integration. So you might, just for that step right there, you might get 3 points. All right, what's next? Plug in, so I plug in 1 for y, gives me a natural log of 4. I plug in 2 for x, so that's -1/2 plus c. So that means c is equal to what? Natural log of 4 and then plus 1/2. Alright. How do I get rid of the natural log? E.
E.
So what's this going to look like when I E it?
E to the -1 over x
4e to the -1 over x plus 1/2. Everybody okay with that? Because if you got a natural log, whatever's inside the natural log becomes a coefficient. Okay, next step.
plus or minus on the other side.
Now, since I have something else besides just y, I'm going to stick the plus or minus in there just for a second, and then in my final answer decide which one do I want. So I get y plus 3 equals plus or minus 4e to the -1 over x plus 1/2, and then I subtract it over. And then at this point, I want to decide if I want the positive or the negative.
Positive.
Which one do I want?
Positive.
I want the positive. So I want the positive version. You do not have to put the positive there. I'm just putting it there. Okay, you can always check by plugging in this x value. Because when you plug in this x value, you should get that y value. So when I plug in 2, I get a -1/2 plus a 1/2, which is 0. E to the 0 power is 1. And then 4 minus 3 gives me the one I'm looking for. Okay? So what else could this have been? -7. Because if this was negative, that would make it a 4 and a -3. -4, -3 would give me a -7. Okay? But they wanted the 1, so that means that has to be the positive. All you got to do is plug in, make sure you get the number you want.
So would it make the whole thing negative? If it was negative, it'd just be the 40.
Just that. All right, next one. All right, dy dx equals 4x cubed y plus 12x cubed. All right, talk to me about this one. All right, Maddie says let's take out the 4x cubed. I agree. So if I do that, I get 4x cubed. That leaves me with y plus 3. Everybody buying that?
Why can't you just divide by y and combine the two?
All right, so why can I not just divide by y like Zach mentions? And what's going to happen to that? I'm going to have a y on the 12x cubed. If I divide by y, I have to divide everything by y, which means that picks up a y, which doesn't do me any good. I still can't get rid of it. It's still on that side. So in order to do something like that, you're always going to have to factor. Just like we did with the e on yesterday's problem. All right, Jennifer, what's going to be on the left?
1 over x plus 3.
1 over what?
X or y plus 3.
Y plus 3. And that leaves me with 4x cubed dx on the right side. All right, Brady, when I integrate 1 over y plus 3, what does that turn into?
Natural
natural log, absolute value, y plus 3. And that's going to be x to the 4th plus c. Plug in. We'll stick negative 5 in for the y. So that's going to be the natural log of 2 on the left. I'm going to stick 1 in for the x, which gives me that. So that means c is going to be the natural log of 2 minus 1. Abate, what's next?
Take your E.
Take the e of both sides. When I e the right side, what's going to be the coefficient? 2. All right. So to get rid of the absolute value, I'm going to do plus and minus just for the moment. Subtract the 3. And then choose whether or not I want that 2 to have a positive or a negative in front of it. Which one do I want?
Negative.
I want the negative in front of it. Again, to check, plug in that 1. So 1 minus 1 gives me 0. E to the 0 power is 1. In order to get 2 at a negative 3 to turn into a negative 5, that 2 needs to be negative. All right, last one. Alright, consider the differential equation. dy over dx equals 4x over y. Find the particular solutions. Y equals f of x to the differential equation with the initial condition of f of negative 2 equals negative 2. And state its domain. So what is that telling me to do? And it's just telling me to do what I've been doing. It's just a lot of words, but we're throwing this in here so that you're used to it. So what do we do to get started? Multiply the y, so I'm going to have y dy equals 4x dx. All right, integrate. So what do I get on the left side? 1/2 y squared. Right side, x squared plus c. 2x, thank you. 2x squared plus c. Alright, plugging in negative 2 for both of them, so that's going to turn into a 2 here. It's going to turn into an 8 there, so that means c is equal to negative 6. Alright, so now we need to solve for y. Multiplied by 2. Which gives me that. And then take the square root. Which one do I want? Hello. I'm about done. I'll give you a call. Alright, so last thing says state its domain. What are we talking about with domain again? X values. What is it I'm allowed to put in the problem? Okay, what's my issue here? What am I not allowed to have inside the square root? Negatives. Okay, so this I'm not allowed for this to produce a negative. So how do I figure that out? Anybody remember that? Ivan? Say it again. Set it equal to 0. You guys are making me proud. So that's going to be x squared equals 12, 3. So x equals plus and minus the square root of 3. All right, somebody else raise your hand and tell me what's next. Roshan?
Plug in something bigger than square root of 3 and something smaller than square root.
All right.
Let's see which gives you
Right. But what did I tell you to, Elias?
sign line.
Sign line is what I'm looking for. That's what I'm talking about. And then we can go and talk about what Roshan was saying. Let's plug in a value in here, figure out whether or not each section is positive or negative. So obviously in the middle, what's an easy number?
0.
0. If I plug in a 0, do I get a positive or negative?
Negative.
I get a negative. Over here, if I plug in a 3, what am I going to get? Positive. And over here, if I plug in a negative, also positive. So that means my domain is what?
Negative 3.
So negative infinity to negative 3. Am I allowed to use the negative 3? Yes. Why? Remember I gave you an 8. What? It's, I can take the root of a 0. When's the only time you can't use the number? If this thing is located where? In the denominator. So since this is not in the denominator, that means I want to bracket.
Would it be negative square root?
Square root of 8 is 3. Thank you. I'm getting excited. You guys are making me proud. And then the other side would be square root of 3 to infinity. Very good. What's somebody say? That's good stuff. You guys are making me proud. You guys made my day. All right, how you guys feel?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Okay. Zach?
What are we doing?
Very good. I don't know. I'll look.